83 points. And this gigantic bombshell from the National Football League. The Raiders announced that the Ravens backed out of the trade agreement that would have sent all-pro defensive end and game wrecker Maxx Crosby to the Ravens in exchange for 2 first-round picks. League sources told ESPN the Ravens NFL insider Adam Schefter. And Adam, it's rare, having done this for as long as I have, I don't want to speak for you, that I'm truly a wait, what kind of a moment. Luka to the Lakers? Hold on a second. What? I'm literally outside looking at my phone and I see this and I think everybody on the internet's been duped. This isn't real. It's real. What happened? What do you know?
Well, Scott, you rarely see trades as large as the one that the Raiders and Ravens agreed to on Friday night where you say, whoa.
Right.
And then you rarely see a trade voided the way that this one was when the Baltimore Ravens backed out of the arrangement that they had made with the Raiders on Friday, nullifying the trade just before the NFL new league year begins at 4 p.m. on Wednesday. Happy New Year to you and everyone out there, Scott. This is a highly unusual circumstance that will create enormous ripple effects, and nobody knows how it will turn out now. Whether Maxx Crosby will wind up playing in Vegas, whether the Raiders will trade him, what the return in a trade for him will be. But no question that this is a setback for all involved right now, because the Baltimore Ravens essentially failed him on their physical. And my understanding is there were multiple doctors that reviewed his MRI scans. There were doctors that examined him, including Dr. Daniel Cooper, the Dallas Cowboys doctor that performed surgery on Patrick Mahomes and Malik Neighbors. Many teams and players rely on Dr. Cooper's expertise. And Dr. Cooper was one of the doctors that reviewed the images where the Ravens then felt compelled to back out of this trade. So there are a whole host of ramifications. Moments ago, Maxx Crosby's agent, C.J. LeBoy, issued a statement that Maxx Crosby is doing great. He'll be back better than ever, and he'll be the game wrecker. But meanwhile, the Raiders have Maxx Crosby back in their possession. The Ravens need to move on, and Maxx Crosby now needs to figure out where he's going to be playing in 2026 as he continues to recover from what was said to be a significant knee injury.
Adam, I had an executive just not suggesting it was fact, but just wondering out loud, like, I don't know, the Ravens got cold feet. I don't know what the talk is around the league, but whatever happens, I mean, you've had 2 days of free agency where people are operating under the guise of Crosby now plays for the Ravens and the Raiders have accumulated a couple of picks. Now that's not the case. I mean, there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube or the genie back in the bottle, but I mean, I would think people are pissed that they operated under the assumption of one thing that's now not true.
Well, Scott, they can say that, and there are people that are going to think that, and that's fine. You're not going to be able to change their minds. But I think it would be important to know if those people were able to have access to the actual medical records, what they then would say.
Of course.
The Baltimore Ravens were investing an awful lot, 2 first-round draft picks. None of us know, outside of the Ravens and those doctors, exactly what was in those medical reports. So, to me, we'll see how it plays out, but unless you know what's in those medical reports, it's hard to say that. Now, the optics are the Ravens got cold feet, and there are going to be people that wonder and are angry and are mad. But this is a situation that essentially unfolded between the Raiders and the Ravens. And unless you've examined the medical reports here, it's hard to jump to that conclusion, though people obviously will, and they will think that the Ravens reneged on this deal.
All right. The longer that I'm talking to you, the less you could be out there breaking news. Let me let you get to doing what you do best. Thanks for taking the time to share what you know. Look forward to finding out more, man. Thank you.
Scott, thank you very much, and Happy New Year.
Likewise. Kevin Clark is with us in studio.
To Baltimore, teams moved on. The Raiders moved on and did so many deals. And now they have to account for the fact that Maxx Crosby is apparently still on their roster and is going to be on their roster, at least for now. And all of the teams that moved on and made deals thinking they had lost out on Maxx Crosby now are potentially back in the mix for Maxx Crosby.
What's up?
If they can figure out a way to make that deal, given all the other deals they have made in the hours since then. It is it is just mind-bending that this trade has fallen through and that everybody goes back to square one and has to figure out where they go from here.
So the Raiders, you talked about the deal. I mean, the deal for Tyler Linderbaum, who was with the Ravens last year, that they feel like we can absolutely blow this thing out of the water because we've got to get to our minimum spend, which you have to do based on the salary cap. There's a ceiling and there's a floor you've got to get to. And so they're like, we got all this money to spend and we've got the ability to blow the Ravens out of the water because of this trade, in large part because that money for Maxx Crosby can now be budgeted elsewhere. Now that's got to affect it. And the Ravens think, are we back in it for Tyler Linderbaum? Because not only the trades, any verbal agreement between agents and players and teams as far as free agents are also not binding until tomorrow. So those are not signed and they could be backed out of as well. It's not great business. It's not the way you want to do things. Frank Gore a couple of years ago, more than a couple of years ago with the Eagles, had agreed there and then backed out before he signed the deal. It can happen. I keep saying the word ripple effects. The ripple effects of this one over the next day or week in NFL business. And then, Ian, go back to what you talked about at the Super Bowl, which was because of Maxx Crosby's surgery, potentially the trade itself could have been pushed to closer to the draft while he recovered from the knee surgery. And people say, well, you're confident he's going to be able to come back from that. Well, clearly in this case, the Ravens say, no, not the case.
Which makes you wonder about everybody's timeline in this, because the surgery, which was on January 7th, wasn't some secret. Like, everybody knew that Maxx Crosby had meniscus surgery. The thing that people don't know is what is going on right now in the past 35 minutes. So a future Hall of Famer, J.J. Watt, says, wait, what happened with the Maxx Crosby trade? Which is the general reaction. Isaiah Rodgers says, dang, free agency crazy, laughing out loud. Hashtag LV and Ravens. Our friend the Nick Shook is saying, man, what? What? Trending on multiple social media sites and applications on the day. And Ian Rappaport succinctly pointing out, wagging his finger at the entire planet. Trades are not official until the league year begins, as Ian reminding everybody more than aware of that right now. And so we've got this recovery timeline, Tom, that's going on. That's been a consistent thing. Is once again, it was a January 7th meniscus repair surgery for Maxx Crosby, who didn't finish the season for the Las Vegas Raiders. We're assuming other teams will be interested, and we've yet to hear at this point, 22 minutes after the Raiders send out the announcement, anything from Baltimore.
Well, at this point, I would say this. The reaction from other people within the NFL that I am getting is predominantly about how the Ravens pulled the rug out, regardless of what their reasoning was. This just does not happen. It has happened on multiple other occasions in the past on much smaller trades or agreements involving the Ravens. However, when you're talking about trading 2 first-round picks, this is not an unknown issue in the NFL. Clearly, they came to the conclusion that there was something they were not comfortable with. And again, it does bear mentioning. 32 teams, 32 doctors, 32 degrees of risk tolerance. What one team might be willing to accept, whether it's in the draft process, a free agent signing, a trade, is something that another team might say, we're simply not going to go there. That's why every year, and we're going through the pre-draft process right now, you'll hear about players having medical flags. There might be 31 teams who say, we won't pass this guy. We won't put a uniform on him.
But if one of the sneakiest Cowboys moves of free agency has nothing to do with the defense and everything to do with pressure inside the quarterback room? Ha! Cowboys Nation, because that is exactly what this Sam Howell signing feels like. The official Cowboys site says Dallas has agreed to terms with Howell on a 1-year deal, and their Day 2 free agency roundup makes it clear this was the first offensive addition after a wave of defensive moves. That means this is not just a random camp arm signing. This is the Cowboys intentionally creating a real backup quarterback battle behind Dak Prescott. Yeah, and that should get your attention. Now, let's be honest about why this matters. The Cowboys on SI report framed it exactly the way a lot of fans saw it. Dallas is not fully handing the QB2 job to Joe Milton III. The official Cowboys story says Howell joins a room with Dak, Joe Milton, and Will Grier, and that alone tells you competition is the point. If the Cowboys were completely satisfied with the backup pecking order, they would not be spending a roster spot and a contract on another quarterback with real starting experience. Ha! Dallas is sending a message. Earn it. And Sam Howell is not some mystery project. The official Cowboys article notes he was originally a 5th-round pick by Washington in 2022 and says Dallas will now be the 3rd NFC East team he's played for. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported the one-year agreement, and ESPN's live free agency tracker notes that Howell has bounced through Seattle, Minnesota, and Philadelphia over the last couple years, but still brings meaningful NFL experience to a backup role. That's the key here. Dallas didn't sign upside only, they signed experience. When you dig into the numbers from the Cowboys on SI report, you see why this creates intrigue. Howell has started 18 of 20 career regular season games and has completed 404 of 645 passes for 4,139 yards, 22 touchdowns, and 23 interceptions. That stat line screams exactly what he is right now. A backup with real game tape, real scars, real reps, and enough ability to make a coaching staff think maybe there's something here if the room is right. And compared to a pure developmental arm, that matters when your starter is Dak Prescott and your team thinks it can compete now. What makes this even more interesting is the timing. The official Cowboys free agency tracker shows Dallas had already attacked defense hard with Rashawn Gary, Jalen Thompson, P.J. Locke, and Odetito Ogbonnia before circling back to offense with Howell. So this is not a team wandering around in free agency with no plan. This is a team that spent early capital and attention fixing the defense, then looked at the quarterback room and said, all right, now let's tighten up QB2. Yeah, that's a very specific kind of roster thinking. And Cowboys Nation, I kind of love the tension this creates. Joe Milton won fans over with the arm talent, the preseason flashes, the pure wow factor. But wow and ready to be QB2 on a contender are not always the same thing. Howell has actually lived through regular season starts. He's made mistakes, he's seen pressure, he's handled real NFL game plans. So this battle is fascinating because it becomes upside versus experience. And those are the best camp battles, the ones where both sides actually have a case. There's also a rivalry edge to this that Cowboys fans are going to enjoy. Howell beat Dallas in his first career start back in Week 18 of the 2022 season with Washington, and now he walks into the Star trying to win a roster spot behind Dak. That is such an NFC East twist. And because he spent 2025 with the Eagles without appearing in a game, Dallas is now the 3rd NFC East team on his resume. That alone makes this move fun for content, fun for debate, and honestly fun for the locker room dynamic too. The big picture here is simple. This is a smart move. It's cheap, it's low risk, it increases competition, and it gives the Cowboys another quarterback with real starting history. It does not threaten Dak Prescott. It does not mean the team is panicking. It means Dallas is acting like a serious team that wants a stronger room behind its starter. And after years of fans asking the front office to stop being passive at key spots, this is exactly the kind of quiet move that makes sense. Yeah, not flashy, but smart. So my reaction is this. Sam Howell makes the Cowboys better, not because he's coming to steal headlines, but because he raises the standard of the backup quarterback room. He gives Dallas a legitimate competition with Milton and Grier, and that means the eventual QB2 should come out sharper, more tested, and more ready if his number gets called. That is how good teams think. That is how serious teams operate. And if the Cowboys keep making these kinds of focused, purposeful moves, this roster is going to look a lot healthier by the time camp opens. Now, I want to hear from you, Cowboys Nation. Who should be Dak Prescott's backup in 2026? Sam Howell, Joe Milton, or Will Grier? Drop your answer in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe, because this quarterback battle just got a whole lot more interesting.